I'm ready. Well, what happens when you blow the whistle? What happened to you, George Green? You're the former architect for the Texas Department of Human Services. I don't know what that means.
Well, I was providing professional services for a Texas state agency. They hired me to evaluate their construction contracts and see to it that we got what we paid for.
So you're the construction auditor on behalf of the taxpayers of Texas to see that they get their money's worth on capital projects being paid for by the state of Texas.
I'm a taxpayer also, yes.
You, the Austin American-Statesman from your capital city, reports, this is from last November. In 1989, you, Mr. Green, complained to your supervisors about poor workmanship by contractors on state jobs. But your complaints were ignored, the Statesman tells its readers. Instead of investigating your complaints, your supervisors investigated you for allegedly abusing telephone privileges and leave time. And then they fired you. What did you, give me some examples of what you were seeing, just that we can understand.
The easy stuff, I think, that everybody would understand is that we had leases that required a certain amount of square footage that we needed to occupy. We were paying, for example, a 10,000 square foot building, but we were only receiving about a 9,000 square foot space to work in. So there was 1,000 square feet that we were paying a lease amount on,
I see.
And we weren't getting it. And
you said to your bosses, hey, this is adding up.
It's right, it added up.
Right. Now, there were other issues that you, just a couple, just...
Saw violations of health and safety rules. Saw examples of tape recordings of fraud and extortion, where people were being paid money not to do certain things.
You had to actually have somebody was wired and got this on tape?
Absolutely.
So what's wrong with blowing the whistle on these folks? You did, didn't you?
I did. That was my job. I was paid to evaluate and determine...
How were you received when you were given these, offering this information to superiors?
Well, I was considered an exemplary employee until it reached the point where I started pointing fingers within our own agency.
Yeah, and then what happened?
Then all hell broke loose. They started after me. They started to suggest that I was not a person with character or integrity. They called me a thief, a liar. They had me indicted, put in jail, arrested.
Yeah. The state of Texas?
In the name of the state of Texas, those officials did that. That's right.
Yeah. How much did you overcharge on that long-distance phone call?
No. There was a 13-cent disputed charge. 13 cents.
And what was this allegation? That you used 13 cents worth of Texas phone?
That's right.
To make a personal call?
That's correct.
Well, then, let's get the noose for you, man. Other things, they were suggesting that you cheated on sick days or something?
My sick leave. They suggested that I was violating and falsifying government documents by telling somebody where I was, when I was, and they alleged that I was not there.
And they made the amount that they claimed that you allegedly cheated on $15,000 worth of sick leave. Do I understand this generally?
Well, actually, I think the number is 1,500, which makes it a third-degree felony.
That's what I wanted you to say, 1,500. So they made the number high enough that it was a felony, which could really be serious and send you to the pokey for a while.
20 years.
This got your attention.
Oh, certainly did.
Yes. Well, what's the end of this story, ladies and gentlemen? Are you ready? A state district court jury awarded this man $13,773,461.96. Under what law? You can't do this to a whistleblower? The state and a jury considered this, did they not?
Oh, absolutely. A jury considered it. A third court of appeal considered it. The Texas Supreme Court validated it.
You know what one of the jurors said in your trial? They wanted to crucify him. Talking about him. We decided there wasn't any dollar amount that will pay him for what he has suffered. Are you unemployed now?
That's right. I'm still unemployed.
Yeah. It doesn't matter as much as it used to, I guess. Here you are. Now, the lieutenant governor and a board has to agree on this amount. Is that right? They have to confirm the judgment of the jury?
The lieutenant governor of Texas, to his credit, was the highest elected official in Texas who decided that there was equity and that he would support the law, and he deserves the credit of that acknowledgement.
You call this gut-wrenching. Here you are being congratulated by friends and others who support whistleblowers. Watch this. This is after the verdict of $13 million is announced. Well, there you are, looking very happy with family, friends, being congratulated. And in a moment, we'll hear the Lieutenant Governor of Texas apologize to you face to face.
You reported your allegations to the executive director of the agency. And what did you get? The Solicitor General started an investigation of you, sir. They followed you as if you were a common criminal and found nothing according to the court judgments.
There. That's a man standing up there in public.
That's a real Texan.
What do you want us to know? I mean, this is pretty darned important here. We're talking about structures that can collapse on people. We're going to be talking about nuclear projects here that could go wrong. Sir.
I think people need to recognize that we all have the capability to do the right thing. And when your time is called, when you have the life, the safety, or the well-being of your fellow Americans, or fellow Texans in my case, on the line,
right, stand
up and be counted. Don't disappear. Don't turn around. Don't walk away.
Joe Macdel is, you were an electrician working on the construction of Comanche Peak nuclear plant in Texas.
That's correct, and the key word is were.
Yeah. You oversaw, you got yourself some promotions when they start building this big dude here. Brown and Root built it, right?
Yes, sir.
Brown and Root is a long-time Texas company. They build dams, they build big things.
Sure do.
They also made Lyndon Johnson rich.
Sure did.
That's another story. Brown and Root. You're building a power plant, a nuclear power plant at Comanche Peak. That's not far from Fort Worth, is it?
No, it's about 60 miles south of Fort Worth.
Right. And you were in charge of the containment building.
I worked in the containment building. And
I see. You're part of the team that's putting in the... That's the most critical part of a nuclear reactor facility, is it not?
That's where the coolant pumps are. If something goes wrong, that's where the meltdown is.
So if you melt down in the containment building. You're a conscientious guy. You know, I assume you had an engineering degree from school?
No, I did not. No, I wasn't an engineer, Bill.
What were you?
I was an electrical foreman.
Oh, I see. All right. And you saw things?
Yes, sir.
What'd you see?
Well, I saw that the construction standards on this nuclear plant weren't even good construction standards, let alone nuclear power standards.
Yeah.
And I brought those things to the attention of management.
And what'd they say?
Goodbye.
They actually fired you.
They sure did.
Not after the first whistleblow here.
Within a few months.
What'd they say to you? Why were you being... How did they explain your dismissal?
Their contention is that I quit. But they fired me.
You were giving speeches, were you not?
Yes, sir.
An electrical foreman at a Texas nuclear plant, the New York Times reported to its readers in 1989, was paid by his former employers in exchange for a promise not to tell federal officials about what he says were safety problems there, even if subpoenaed. What's that story? Did they try to buy your silence?
They sure did. I filed a suit against them for a wrongful discharge. My attorneys saw fit to settle that suit against my wishes. I vehemently opposed the settlement. We have conversations where we're yelling and screaming at each other, all taped, all documented, but the settlement went forward. And the main thing about that settlement was I could not bring those safety violations to the NRC or to the licensing board. I had to sit back and be quiet.
You have to take some responsibility for this, though, for agreeing with your lawyers, do you not?
I didn't agree with the lawyers.
They just went ahead and settled without your hearing about it?
No, I heard about it. I said, don't do it. I argued with them.
And they went ahead anyway?
And they did it anyway.
They got $20,000, didn't they? The lawyers?
The lawyers got $20,000.
What'd you get?
15.
Was there a suit after this?
Yes, sir.
There was a suit by a citizens group, was there not?
Well, there was a suit to intervene in the licensing of the plant. And these same lawyers were representing that citizens group.
So your lawyer, unbeknownst to you, was representing another citizens group filing against the same Brown and Root that was building the building in which you were once an employee.
That's correct, yeah.
You think there's a conflict of interest?
Oh, absolutely.
Was that suit settled, this other suit?
Yeah, they withdrew their opposition to the plant, and I think there was about $10 million that exchanged hands.
The other people suing the plant for alleged malfeasance of construction and other problems were given $10 million to shut up?
$10 million to withdraw their objections to the licensing.
This was not a law, this was not a jury verdict or a mandated by the court.
No.
This was out-and-out payoff.
An out-and-out payoff.
Okay, we have to say, for the record, do we not, Mr. Machtel, that you can't prove that $10 million exchanged hands?
Well, that's what all the, everything that's been reported, yeah.
Uh-huh. Why, how come you get 15,000, these other people get 10 million?
They kept me quiet before.
It worked for you in 1989, didn't it? I mean, actually, you had to keep quiet, didn't you?
I was
Those were the terms of the agreement.
The terms of the agreement, and they were very strong. And these people, if I would have breached that contract, would have financially ruined me. I'd have never worked again.
You actually had to go underground, did you?
I sure did.
You had to hide your kids.
I sure did.
You were followed, were you?
Yes, sir.
Who followed you?
Well, we've pinned it down to basically two people.
Well, you don't have to tell us who they are without, you know, I mean, I don't want to be deposed for the rest of my life.
The Nuclear Regulatory Commission, for one.
NRC,
The NRC and Brown and Root's private investigators.
Yes. Now that, once again, is an allegation. I just want to...
Yes.
This audience is entitled to know what's proven and what isn't. But your statement about your suspicion of these two agencies is on the record. Well, what are you doing now? You're suing your own lawyers for not telling you about the fact that they may have had a conflict of interest, and how come you got 15 when everybody else got 10 million?
I'm suing my previous lawyers for malpractice, yes. There was a suit filed, and then the judge saw fit to stay that suit until the Department of Labor suit was settled. It has taken us 10 years to finally come to a hearing in the Department of Labor. We finally had my hearing last week in Houston.
And what happened?
Well, the judge, the secretary still has to rule. We don't expect a ruling on him until probably maybe the latter part of the year.
How did it go at the hearing? Are you optimistic? What are you asking for?
We're asking for reinstatement and the back wages. They fired me in January of 1986. And since they fired me, first of all, I couldn't get a job for a long time. We live in a small town, and I just couldn't even get a job in a small town.
So you've had to have some income. You're not destitute.
Yeah, I've had work since then, here and there. But right now, I'm unemployed.
Right. If you had it to do again, would you blow the whistle?
Yes, I would, but I'd do it in a different manner. I took my problems to my company, to my management. These are the people I was loyal to. I say, hey, Brown and Root, we're doing this wrong. You know, the NRC is going to see this, and the NRC did. They found numerous violations when I finally brought it all to them. And if I had to do it over again, yes, I would, but I'd do it in a different manner. I wouldn't take it to my superiors. I would, maybe I could send some anonymous letters and some documentation to
You protect yourself more than you did.
You darn right I would.
So you're here to say that if you're going to blow the whistle, you better be ready for the ride of your life.
You better be ready for the ride of your life. And
it could change your life.
It changed ours.
And you don't, no matter how right you are, you could be one big loser.
Yeah. Financially, I may never get anything out of it. And that's okay.
Yes.
Because we've changed some laws. When we brought this stuff before the Senate, laws were changed.
All right.
What they did to me, they can't do anymore.
Uh-huh. What is the status of Comanche Peak Nuclear Plant? Is it operative?
Yes, sir. But I moved 300 miles upwind.
You really think that's an inferior design, construction, faulty?
Yeah. Surprising to some people, I am an advocate of nuclear power. I think nuclear power is a good thing. I don't think the Comanche Peak is a good thing. There's some design flaws. and the construction was real shoddy.
We heard recently, front page New York Times Magazine, we have a problem similar to this in Connecticut. You're not surprised by this, are you?
I'm not.
Yeah, you aren't either, George.
No, I'm not.
Well, you have to wonder, what is the condition of all our nuclear power plants? We have over 100. If you've got problems like this at Comanche Peak.
Cutting corners saves corporate America millions, if not billions. And they're doing it on our back, and that's a disaster that we've got to prevent.
Well, we haven't met Bill Sanjour yet. He worked for the EPA, Environmental Protection Agency, for 22 years. And he blew a whistle. And you found yourself with it. How many people in the department they sent you to?
Oh, I was manager of a department with 22 people writing hazardous waste regulations, and when I blew the whistle, I was transferred to a department that had no people and no functions.
So you had an office. Was there a window in the office?
No.
That's how they get you, you know. That's about as close to you get. Next thing is crackers and water. We'll find out what happened to William Bill Sanjour when we come back in just a moment. Attorney at Law Michael Cohn, may I ask you to stand? You're General Counsel for the National Whistleblower Center.
Yes,
well,
I am.
What a Boy Scout you must be. Seriously, Whistleblower Center, I mean no disparagement at all, but we need more of this. We got a lot of things going down, and we don't see it, and all those people behind closed doors that decide going to save some money. Pretty soon, you're threatening the lives of the people in the neighborhood of Comanche Peak. What did you want to straighten out for us here? You represent Mr. Macdell, among others, on our stage.
Yes,
please,
I do.
Mr. Cohn.
Well, Joe was almost right. It wasn't 10 million, it was 12 million, and it is documented.
Now, let's say, wait a minute, 12 million, which was given by Brown and Root to the citizens group which challenged what they alleged to be faulty workmanship at the Comanche Peak.
It was, Brown and Root was the contract. It was given by the owner, Texas Utilities, who paid off Brown and Root's whistleblowers and everyone else to make everyone go away and say the plant was safe.
Who made the payment?
Texas Utilities.
So a state agency was paying
No,
tax?
it's a private utility, and they bought off all the co-owners. They had co-owners.
Oh, it's a private, I'm sorry, so Texas Utility is a privately held company?
Yes, sir.
It's not an agency or a
No,
board?
buy it on the New York Stock Exchange.
Uh-huh. And can you prove that they gave $12 million in hush money to...
Yeah, originally they came out and admitted to 5, but then after we pursued it a little while, we learned that there was a lot more that had come out, and they came clean with, I think it came out to a total of 12.5. There was one whistleblower who was eventually cut out of it, the guy who started the whole thing, and how we ran into Joe was, there was a guy, he said, you have to accept $200,000 and agree not to raise your safety concerns. They told me that, and this whistleblower said no, and
yes.
It made it front page of the papers, and we get a call from Joe saying, hey, same thing happened to me except a year ago, and I got a tape recording and documents to prove it.
Okay.
Joe?
But the $12 million was money from a private company.
That's right.
Which was given to these other whistleblowers.
So they could get their license and not have to fix a safety concern.
Don't make trouble. And we can assume then that amount of money would be absorbed by increased rates for Texas utility consumers.
That's correct.
All right. You also represent Mr. Sanjour, is that so?
That's also true.
Okay, we're about to talk to Mr. Sanjour. You appear to be well represented here, sir. Let's just understand this. I was a branch chief, you told us, in the 70s, writing regulations for hazardous waste management. You had a staff of about 20 people you've established. President Carter was getting a lot of pressure from the hazardous waste industry and was fighting inflation, wanted to keep big business happy so they wouldn't fight against... Well, why is that important to know?
Well, do you remember inflation? Well,
I sure do.
When the
We were up there almost at 20%, weren't we, on the,
Yeah.
some of those bonds? And
Well, when the president's faced with inflation, what he does is to beg industry to hold down the prices. And of course, these big industries come back to the president and say, hey, you got to do something about these pointy-headed guideline writers who are writing all these regulations.
Inflation is death, really, economic death for millions of people, so they're frightened about it.
So
I
is
get it.
hazardous waste. So what the word came down, we were writing hazardous waste regulations, the word came down from the White House to cut it out. So we were essentially ordered to emasculate our regulations, cut them back, and not only cut them back, but invent excuses for why we were doing it.
An Environmental Protection Agency policy analyst.
Well, that's what I am now.
That's you. reported the Associated Press in 1991, accused the agency Tuesday of trying to muzzle his criticism by barring him from accepting travel expenses for speaking engagements. You were popping off, weren't you, at these speaking engagements?
Oh, yes.
And these were citizen groups. And you were going there, you were going on the road, and you'd get up on weekends, not on company time, and you'd say, here's what I'm seeing.
I would essentially correct the impressions that EPA was making. EPA officials would go out there and tell them that this incinerator is fine, it's lovely, or this landfill is not going to leak for 1 million years. And I come there with EPA documents and show them EPA's own study shows that that landfill is going to leak before it's even finished.
Right. And what happened to you as a result of that?
Well, they got a lot of nasty letters, of course, from EPA got a lot of nasty letters from these people, from the sponsors of these facilities. And they'd have to send back saying, well, he's on his own time and he has the First Amendment to protect him, so there's nothing we can do about it. And eventually, they got the so-called Office of Government Ethics, which is a oxymoron, to write a regulation.
Yeah.
To write a regulation saying that if you're speaking on government business, you can't collect travel expenses on your own time. You're speaking on your own time. And that's where I met the Coen brothers.
So it's a little bit like my employer saying, if I'm a stamp collector, I can't go to Minneapolis to speak about, to philatelists about stamps.
Well,
I mean, that's a violation of something here. Isn't there a Constitution disallowing this kind of...
Yeah, but it's a little different. I work for the government, and the people who own the government are not the managers of the government, it's the public. And I was telling the public who own the government information which they paid for. They paid my salary. They paid the salary of the people who collected this information.
Yeah.
And I was just presenting them this information which contradicted the false information they were getting from the government,
right.
Government officials.
So they transferred you to an office without any windows and no staff.
And the function of that new position was basically to find some excuse to get rid of me. All I did was play cat and mouse games with my supervisor. Well, he tried to figure out ways to get rid of me, and I had to counterfoil them back and forth.
And this is the United States government treating you this way. This is the EPA. This is the Environmental Protection Agency. The agency that all those Republican freshmen in Congress hate. They hate OSHA. They hate you. They hate EPA. It hurts small business. It causes a lot of shuffling of in and out and all that. It's cost me and I can't make any money.
Hey, Phil, the government breaks more laws in a day than the mafia does in a year.
Really? Well, but maybe we ought to listen. Maybe we should listen to these Republicans. Maybe these agencies are wasteful and just kind of shuffling paper and not really doing anything, I would ask you.
The only time they do anything is when the courts order them. When the laws are written, the agency tends to ignore them or weaken them. Eventually, some environmental groups, and I've encouraged the environmental groups to do this, will sue the government. They'll be brought to court. The court will order them to enforce the law. They'll procrastinate and wait a couple of years. The court will order them again to enforce the law. Eventually, they get around to enforcing the law 10 years after it was
If I'm the
required.
government and I give him a $50 million contract to build a waste disposal management thing, and some smart guy like you, and I just spent $40 million building it, I want my $10 million property, and you say, leaks. You're building leaks. Your waste site leaks.
Like that.
I am going to hate you. I'm going to think of all my stockholders. I'm going to think of my bottom line. I'm going to think of my bonus. I'm going to think of the next fiscal quarter. I'm the boss of this company. I'm going to do everything I can to shut you up, because if people start taking you seriously, I'm out $40 million bucks, not to mention the potential profit. I don't think there is a full appreciation of the enormous terror, economic terror that is wielded by the whistleblower and what those in power will do to shut you up. Did you feel, you must have been naive yourself before all this happened.
I'm perhaps a little bit smarter than most whistleblowers. I read up on the laws and the procedures before I got too involved, and I knew how to protect myself. And one of the things I did to protect myself is to associate myself with the people who I was protecting, namely the communities that are affected by this, form alliances with them, and basically get them to protect me through their own uses, through their congressmen, through their...
Your attorney is quoted by on the issue of you can't go and criticize the EPA. You cannot accept travel and expenses from an agency if you go and speak to them and criticize the EPA. Your attorney said it pretty well, as we shouldn't be surprised. If he's going to criticize the EPA, this is how he interprets this ruling. He can't accept the reimbursement. If he were speaking about gardening, he could.
That's right.
Now that's on its face, that's unconstitutional.
Yes. We won.
But are you still, how did you win?
Took
What
us
did you
4
win?
years, but eventually we got a ruling from the appellate court in the District of Columbia, which on First Amendment grounds said it was unconstitutional.
Yes. But you've received no cash award as a result of the...
No, of course not.
Well, you're laughing. You know, he's not laughing. Right here. Why would you laugh? I mean, why wouldn't a lawsuit be possible for you, too? Humiliation, a small office, people ignored you, you had nobody to report to. This is a total attempt to disgrace a human being. Hell, I mean, I could be your lawyer on this one.
Ask my lawyer that.
What?
Right there.
But you sound not interested, Mr. Sanjour.
Oh, I'm not in this to make money. If I saw an opportunity to make money out of it, certainly I'd take it, but...
Well, for a man of your conscience, though, not to want to make EPA say uncle...
Oh, I got him to say uncle on quite a few occasions. That's very satisfying.
You want to give an honest day's work for an honest day's pay. Very telling. You have no greed. You do not lust for money. But your conscience moves you to speak out on behalf of the people when you see leaky waste sites that are passed as okay by the EPA and things like that. Children, because of you, will be playing probably in safer neighborhoods as a result. You must take great joy.
I do indeed.
Well, we got more whistleblowers for you here, and we'll talk to them when we come back in just a moment. This Minneapolis area paper, the great bus robberies, the slug here. Let's start from the beginning here. Mr. Lindgren, sir, you've been a police officer for over 30 years, is that right?
That's correct, Phil.
Minneapolis Police Department.
No, it was a suburban department,
Okay.
Minnetonka.
Now we have the Minneapolis Public Commission. What is this?
It's now called the Metropolitan Council Transit Operations. It's the transit authority.
Which oversees
Yes.
What was your job?
I was a captain of the investigative division within the transit.
Did they hire you for that purpose?
Yes, they did.
So you moved from your very safe, I assume you were what by then, a captain, sergeant, I don't know.
Well, in Minnetonka, at that time, I was a sergeant.
And you moved then from that long-held job to this government post, which obliged you to oversee the authority that ran Minneapolis-St. Paul public transit system.
Yes, sir.
Was there some problem that they wanted you to chase as a cop?
They wanted to start the investigative section or division because of problems that they had uncovered employees.
The burglary began shortly before 5 o'clock on the morning of February 25th, 1991. A U-Haul truck pulled up to the overhaul base on Cleveland Avenue North in St. Paul, where the Metropolitan Transit Commission repaired its vehicles. One of the building doors opened from the inside to let the burglars in. Two men got out of the truck and rolled 4 large tires, public property bought and paid for by bus fares and tax dollars, up to the back of the truck, hoisted them inside, and drove away. You're saying this was common?
I don't know if that was common, but it happened on that particular morning.
But we had a lot of theft, did we not? I mean, they didn't hire you because everything was going great here.
Right. Let me refer you to my attorney, Phil, and that is Robert Hill. And of all the hundreds of hours that we have talked and discussed this case, he is well versed on that.
Your client uncovered a systematic theft and embezzlement.
Yes, he did, Phil. He actually...
And he reported it.
He did. What we did know was that the burglary occurred at 5 in the morning. You see on the tape that the doors are being pushed open. There were only 4 employees there.
We want to get to the whistleblowingness of this.
Yeah.
He reported it.
Yes, he did.
What happened to him?
They demoted him, locked him out of his office, confiscated his files, told him to go police the buses, which basically is akin to sitting in a room without any responsibility.
And nobody reporting to you?
no responsibility whatsoever.
Yeah. So what are you doing on behalf of Mr. Lindgren? We should say this is not funny at all. You've really got a crisis of faith here. Do I understand you? Can you talk to us about your own personal feelings here?
My personal feelings, sure. What do you want to know?
You don't, I don't know. Are you cynical now about government? And
my faith has been shaken a little bit.
You drive a bus now?
I drive a school bus for a very good company, Eden Prairie School District.
Yeah, but this isn't what we want, 31-year police officer.
That's correct.
Was he fired then, finally?
They called it reinstatement. We called it constructive discharge. When you take a guy that's an honorable cop and you tell him, we're stripping you of your badge, we're taking your car, we're locking you out of your office, I call that being fired.
Why could they be so, how can they be so bold as to take a 31-year police veteran who came over voluntarily to work for this agency to make sure no taxpayers' money was missing, and bust him from sergeant to even lower? Is that what they did?
Yeah, it's unconscious arrogance, Phil. You've got political reputations that reach all the way up into the governor's office at stake here. So those had to be protected, and this guy is nothing but an ant.
And you're suing?
We did.
And?
We settled for $125,000.
Not a whole lot of money when you think about what's being thrown around here. We've got a lot of zeros up on the stage here.
We started the suit...
Minus your fee, which is certainly legal. No scandal. I don't mean to suggest there is.
Yeah.
But he, you know, what is he going to get here? Say, take a third, we're talking $90,000 maybe?
Yeah.
90 grand. That'll make it to maybe a year from June. I'll give you a chance to make your case.
All right.
The music means we're long, and we'll be back in just a moment. But you did sue. You got a judgment of $125,000. We're glad it's that and not nothing, but you'll understand, risking looking greedy, we wonder why it isn't more. And
well,
you're saying?
Yeah, one of the things you have with these suits that you have to evaluate is how long the case would go if you go to trial. It may have been years before Dick would have seen a dime had we gone any further. Even if you get a jury verdict, they're going to appeal.
Right. What's this done to you emotionally, I would ask you, Mr. Lindgren?
It's like taking the wind out of your sails if you were a boat. You're just kind of floating.
They stripped you? What were you? You said you were a sergeant.
I was a captain.
You were a captain with this agency?
With that agency.
So they take what? You know, what do you got, a bird on your, that's a colonel or captain of bars. Did they take them off?
Well, not physically, but essentially they strip you of just about everything.
Yeah. And this had to depress you. I mean, I'm not insisting that it does, but I mean, come on.
Sure, I went to the psychologist. I never thought, all my years of experience, I've sent people and recommended self-help groups, you know, counseling services. Never thought that I would myself use one.
Yeah.
You know, but I did, and I had to, and I mean, I really had to.
How do you explain this? I mean, this is pretty hysterical response to you.
Yeah. I think they just didn't want an organization to be
making trouble.
Right.
Bill, if I could just interrupt for a minute. It's even worse than the way he's described it.
You're Edwin Carter, Ph.D. You're a clinical psychologist in private practice in Northern Virginia, and you counsel whistleblowers.
Indeed,
well,
I
you're
do.
in the right place.
Yeah, that's right.
You're in suburban Washington.
That's correct.
And you wanted me to know what about Mr. Lindgren?
Well, like most whistleblowers, like most people who've been emotionally numbed by the experience, he's understating his symptoms. Most people don't get a lot of money suing and whistleblowing incidents. Most people suffer depression and, most importantly, paranoia. When you lose faith in the system, particularly when you've been working with the system, you're left devastated.
And looking over your shoulder.
All the time.
Whose phone was tapped?
Mine.
Tapped your phone?
Tapped my phone. My wife and I had a conversation. Well, this was in... When the DC-9 went down in Denver, and I said, my goodness, that's almost like Comanche Peak. Then a couple days later, a private investigator met with us, I didn't know he was a private investigator, and he handed me two 9x10 photographs, one of a 727 and one of a DC-9. He said, "Joe, which one's a DC-9? I said, "That one is." And he said, "And how does that resemble Comanche Peak?" Now, this was a conversation my wife and I had
On the
in our
telephone.
living.
On the telephone.
Right. And they tapped our phone. The only thing that got me through this thing, Phil, was my family.
Brown and Root funded Lyndon Johnson's campaign for Senate, Majority Leader, Vice President, and President. And you pick on Brown and Root. Boy, I'll tell you what, they'll never call you chicken.
And
We'll be
I've only
back.
just begun.
And we'll be back in just a moment.
The state paid me under my name $13 million. I've paid out millions of dollars in fees to people who supported me. And under the civil law. And that's got to bring everybody in Texas to a pause.
But most whistleblowers truly don't get much money at all. This is not an area where people
How does that do that?
Very good point.
And are those
Yeah.
documents sealed to the public?
Yeah, why the muzzle, if that's the whole point, you know?
Bill, I'd like to comment on that because we're here today and we're taking
Oh, I'm sure. It got their attention. That's right.
But the fact of the matter is that it is wrong for confidentiality provisions to be put in these settlement agreements for the very reason that the woman is pointing out.
I agree.
Yeah, we challenged it, and we were the first people to get him struck down as being illegal. Joe McTell's settlement was found illegal. The NRC, Nuclear Regulatory Commission, found it legal and approved it.
Yes.
And then we had to go all the way up to the Court of Appeals to strike it down as being illegal. Our government could not understand the fact that when you put in black and white that you can't raise your safety concerns to the government, it's not illegal.
Yes.
But the law is such that you have no, if you're gagged, you're gagged. And the only reason Joe couldn't be gagged is when Congress wrote that particular law, there was a little provision in it that said the Secretary of Labor had to approve the settlement, and how could the Secretary approve a settlement that was illegal? So in that case, we could get his overturned, but everywhere else, in your tort litigation, you get a car, it blows up in flames, someone dies, they settle it, it's gagged, and all the documents in discovery are secreted, and the next person has the same car, same thing happened, secreted again.
Yes. I feel the same way about signing a contract which commits you to not say anything bad about your employer.
Well,
you're working for an airplane company, you see them putting faulty screws into the wing, you can't sing because you just signed a contract with the company, the plane goes down, you're standing in the rubble, and the people say, "Why didn't you tell us? Why didn't you tell us?" I couldn't, I signed a contract.
You mentioned that one. If you blow the whistle on an unsafe airplane, you're not covered. If you blow the whistle on an unsafe truck, you are. The government has piecemeal legislation. There's nothing coherent. There's no law. You say, "I blew the whistle. I want to go somewhere." Lawyers don't even know what to do because there is no real law. You got to go searching around. No one knows what the laws are, and there is no comprehensive law. One state you're covered, one state you're not. One agency you are, one agency you're not.
This is the law as it has been created by big business.
Big business.
Which is saying, sit down, shut up, don't make any trouble, we'll be all fine, look at our stock is up, don't you worry about anything, we'll be back in just a moment.
Thank you for trying to make the world a better place.
Very good point. Now, Dr. Carter, sir, what should we know then about, well, first of all, you've made a very important point, that you don't get rich whistleblowing. We do see in the paper about these gigantic judgments, but they're very rare. Who are these people that whistleblow, and why don't we have more of it, and wouldn't it be a wonderful world if we did?
Well, they're very highly principled people who believe in the public welfare, who believe in doing the right thing, who follow rules, and believe that the companies they work for, agencies they work for, should follow rules as well. And they're typically harassed and criticized for being that way.
They want to uphold the rules. They're not interested in pragmatism. They're they're often perfectionistic.
Perfectionistic, idealistic people, and that's why they're so destroyed when their characters are vilified, when they are attacked personally and their families are attacked, and in some cases where they are physically attacked.
Yeah. You say some of them become hardened and embittered.
That's right. They lose their faith in man, they become emotionally insulated, and most importantly, paranoid.
I can't think of anything worse than to be a Boy Scout, step up to the plate, do the right thing, and get clobbered for it.
And that's exactly what happens. And if you go to trial in one of these cases, you hear these cases being settled, you go to trial, every little piece of information about you, every trip to the doctor's office, everything will come out at that trial, and you will get massacred even more. That's why a lot of whistleblowers back off. That's why they oftentimes takes them a great deal of time to come forth and acknowledge what has been going on.
Yeah.
Amen.
I tell you what, I'm going to tell everybody I know you personally. What were you going to say?
They brought up in our hearing things that happened back in 1962.
You were in high school, for God's sake.
I know it.
And we'll be back in just a moment.
You're here today. I mean, why haven't they paid you to keep quiet now?
I'm here on my own time. I took a day off.
Well, no, but this is a good question. I mean, this can't help you at work. You are calling into question the purpose and the oversight of the EPA.
But I've been doing that for 20 years. I mean, what else is new?
But isn't it a shame you have to sit there in this place and be ignored as a consequence of this?
Well, I'm not completely ignored. I do have things to do.
Yes. You don't think there'll be any particular penalty you'll be assessed as?
10, 15 years ago there might have been, but by now I've established myself as somebody that's pretty hard to get rid of.
Well, will you join me in offering these proud Americans a thank you?
Services provided and promotional fees paid by the following.